Okay, so I've got about 20 minutes. Fasten your seatbelts. This is going to be quite a ride. It's going to be fun, I promise you. It's a big topic. I'm going to whiz through at a fairly fast lick. So let me first of all explain what the term open banking means, right? So this is the generally accepted view in the industry. It is the requirement that is being put on the top 9 banks. That's what we normally refer to them as the CMA 9 banks. That's the Competition and Markets Authority, who have basically forcing the top 9 banks to do this open banking thing. Now, what does that mean? What it means is they're asking us to open our digital doors via APIs to provide access to these guys. This data, customer data, product data, and the initiation of payments. So in a sentence, that's what it is, okay? Our hand is being forced. Now, the key operative word up there you'll see is APIs. We're going to do this via APIs, and first of all, we'll explain what an API is, okay? So look at the top part of the slide there, and you'll see I'll call him George, and he's sitting at his web browser and he's typing www dot something, and off that request goes using a protocol we've all heard of called HTTP, goes over the web, reaches a web server, and the web server fires back a nicely formatted web page that then gets displayed in his browser. Yes? All makes sense? Now, an API is just like that, except that instead of it being George, it's a program, it's a computer, it's a device, a mobile device, generally, although it could be a PC and this kind of thing, a Mac. And the computer again talks HTTP to a web server, just like before, and back comes a web page. Except that this time, the web page is not formatted with beautiful GIFs and JPEGs and flashing advertisements. It's just the raw data. So if you cast your eye on it, it will look a bit ugly, right? But it's basically just the same information. It's just not formatted because computers are not interested in the aesthetics of a web page, yeah, like you and me, okay? That's what an API is. It's as simple as that. And because it is leveraging the infrastructure that was put in place worldwide for the web, it is meant that it is spread very quickly, very fast. So that's what an API is. Now, what does this enable? What's the big thing? And the answer is, it enables innovation. Innovation both internal to the organization and external. And I've tried to separate both these views. Now, the external innovation, you'll hear this term fintech. And what fintech is financial technology, shortened form of that. So it's companies that are focused on financial technology, building things. And they build things often with APIs. And so if a bank offers its services, its products, its information via an API, a fintech can come along and build something on that. And so what it's doing is it's in effect enabling innovation. The point about innovation is you're not, as an institution, specifying. You're not going to the market and saying, I want ABC for this market, X, Y, Z. You're not being specific. But of course, you can be specific if you wish. But the whole point of APIs is, and this whole ecosystem, what is generally called API ecosystem is, we're just providing these functions as a library and saying, come on guys, you come and build something for us. And what the fintechs do is they target niches, often, that we're not targeting. And in their niche, they tend to be black belt, very good at it, right? And so that's why it's not like fintechs are our enemy. Fintechs are good. However, as we'll see as we go through, there is an underlying threat to large banks like ours, which we'll come on to, that we need to be prepared for with open banking. So it enables innovation from third parties, but also internally it enables innovation. You see, you guys are fairly new to this organization, and what you'll realize as you get into it, move between departments, is that we are very siloed. You know, Department A doesn't talk to Department B, doesn't talk to Department C, and so on. Right? Now, we try to, but all big companies suffer from this silo mentality. And of course, it can progress into situations where one team won't talk to another, right? But the reality is we are siloed. And let's say you're working in CPB. You're working in that franchise. And your franchise is all about corporate and business customers. But one day you got this idea and it's got to do with the personal customers, PBB. But you're not working in that part of the bank. So what are you going to do with your idea? Well, in the traditional way of working, there's nothing you can do except get frustrated. Or go find a friend, right? The whole point with APIs is that you are enabling people and giving them their prerogative to go and look at any piece of data. You should be able to look as an internal employee at any piece of data that is available externally. Absolutely. But also there may be some data that we do want to share internally that we don't share externally for reasons of competitive things, but you should have access to it. But the old-fashioned way of thinking was, well, it's not your department. You don't have rights to that, right? The whole point of this is to make as many APIs available as possible, so that if I want an idea one day and I want to realize it, I can hackathon style go and cook something up over the weekend. Because if I can get access to customer data here, product data here, account data here, authentication information here, and I can wire it all together very quickly, I can come up with a proposition and show it to somebody very quickly. And so things will pop up. Ideas will come forward. And so one of the mantras I've got up there is the famous Facebook one, which says, code wins out. If you can create something and show it, you've kind of won the argument. And as these companies, these internet companies, what are generally called the tech titans, grew up, they discovered there was all these battles that went on. You see, well, our way is better than your way, and this kind of thing. And what Zuckerberg said was, the code wins the argument. It doesn't matter whether your idea is better than his idea. This team over here has written the code and it works. So it's good. So that underlines a theme, which what comes out of this is, we need to get stuff done quickly. And much more quickly than we've done things in the past. Mentioned briefly this morning about the necessity of a cultural reboot. Partly that's attitude, partly that's you guys as young guys, but it's also partly to do with our approach to technology and being open externally and open internally, to say, if I'm looking after customer data, say, I can make a certain level of that available safely through obfuscation and other techniques, so that anybody in the bank who has ideas about customers can go and play with it and come up with things. So, net, what does all this mean? What does this mean to the bank as a company? Right? Now think about this. We have no choice. We are being required, forced in effect, by the regulator to open our digital doors. We cannot refuse. No choice. We cannot charge for the privilege. We can't make money off it. And we can't even require a contract with the third party. I mean, it is possible for us to have a contract with a third party if the third party consents. Maybe we give them something extra for that. But in general, the old way of working was always you go to market, you pick a third party, you anoint one, and then you contract them to death, right? So that if they do something wrong, we can punitively punish them, really, really go for them, right? But you cannot do this in this new ecosystem. So this is the reality. Now, is this a good idea? Do you think the bank would do this of its own volition? Anybody?
No.
No, they wouldn't, correct. A bank would never volunteer to do this. It's got too much invested in its own customers and the relationship they have with the customers. Okay? Now let me tell you a little story. When I was young, we were encouraged to take cod liver oil. And it came neat in a bottle. And you got it by the spoon. And it was disgusting. Right? So he said, I don't want this. But grandmother would say, take it. It's good for you. Right? It's a bit like that. So I liken the regulator here to be like the grandmother, right? It's saying this is actually good for you. This open banking, these APIs are good, so you will do it. You've actually no choice because we're in charge. Okay? Are you going to disagree with her? I'd be too scared. Their objective here is to tilt the playing field, you see, away from the big guys. They want more competition. They want more smaller guys. And they will be successful because if they're not successful at 10 degrees, they're going to tilt it more. So this is a reality that we have to face. It's our job within the bank to make it so. So the net here is we are being disrupted. Not very comfortable. We are being disintermediated. And to coin a phrase from Star Trek, resistance is futile. Absolutely. Now here's one bird I don't fancy. And those who are Trekkie will know who she is. She's the Queen of the Borg. And this is what the Borg said. Lower your sails, surrender your ships. We will add your biological and technological distinctiveness to our own. Your culture will adapt to service us. Resistance is futile. Now, what we must get is how significant the change that open banking is going to bring. It is significant. It is the biggest thing in banking since the checkbook, unquestionably. The question I want to pose for you to think about this afternoon is this. Is the threat existential? By which I mean, is the dangers that open banking pose of sufficient moment that it could actually bring down the bank? You answer that question. Now, briefly, here is our webpage, and I've listed down here, these are all different services that we offer, all the different products. And these are third-party companies that are all targeting particular niches. So we've got loans, but so have Zopa, for example, just to pick one randomly off the list there, right? Their service is so easy. It is so good. And by the way, they are doing all this and targeting niches that we're a generalist company, right? We're a generalist bank. They're targeting niches, and this is before the advent of APIs. What is it going to be like as we hit January 2018 and we are offering transactional access to all our accounts in a mandatory way? We have to do it. It's going to get worse. If I move to the right-hand side of that same web page, you've got another whole consideration. It's a list of life moments, right? And you click into these life moments, and it'll take you to some service that we offer or some product that we're trying to sell. And what we've listed again is another whole bunch of third parties that are targeting those niches. So if I was to pick one, for example, let's say having a baby or kids and teens, the bottom one is Rooster Money. I don't know if you can read it. That company's a little tiny little company, but you know, that's all they do, and they're very good at it. And we don't really target that market at all. And so you get to this realization that it's very hard for us to compete against the specialists in their chosen niche. So you come to this conclusion, I do anyway, that in order to compete, we need to change. We need to change rapidly. We need to change our culture. We need to change the nature of the kind of animal we are. One day the scorpion was going down and he got to the river and he couldn't cross. And he noticed a little frog there and he says, "Hey frog, how about I pop on your back and you can carry me across?" And the frog says, "No way, Jose, because if I do that, you'll sting me." And he says, No. I promise, I won't. Okay. So Mr. Frog let Mr. Scorpion on his back and he's swimming halfway across. And halfway across, all of a sudden, the scorpion goes, "Cat!" stings him. And as they're both drowning and gurgling in the water, the frog says, "Why did you sting me?" And the scorpion says, "Because it's my nature." He couldn't change. Now the question is, can we change? I believe we have to change. The kind of animal we are, we need to become like a software company. It has to feel like a tech company. We need to behave like a tech company that happens to purvey banking products. Another little story. I remember I used to go and visit this artist in Glasgow. He was a tremendously gifted man, and a very old man, dead many years now, but he painted a lovely portrait of my wife when we were married. Beautiful portrait, like stunning. And I used to go and visit him, and every time you went to his house, there was an instantaneous smell of, is it linseed oil? The kind of oil that painters use anyway. And there'd be also this sound of a grandfather clock. You know how they sound? With a big pendulum, it goes. And just store that memory for a second. And then I want to tell you about my grandfather. When I used to go and visit my grandfather as a little boy, he'd pull up his wrist and you see he would have, I've got 2 watches on, that's unusual, right? That's just for effect. But my grandfather would have 3, 4, all the time. And it's because he had a hobby and he liked to fix people's watches. And in those days you had to, fix the spring and make the little fine adjustments, and then it wouldn't be keeping time right after you've adjusted it, so he would have to check it every few hours and adjust it, you see, and that's what he'd be doing. And you could hear the tick. And the tick would be tick, 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 right? You could hear it constantly. Fast. Now just keep those 2 things in a minute in your mind, because I want to illustrate it. We used to measure computer performance to do with the clock speed of the chip. Anybody remember those days? 4.77 megahertz chips. Intel 8088. Moving to Intel 386, 486, Pentium. People don't talk about it anymore because all our computing has moved to the cloud. But in the old days, if you had fast clock speed, your computer could process faster. And it made me think one day, what is the clock speed of the Royal Bank of Scotland? Is it fast? Or is it slow? You guys are only a few weeks into this company. What do you think it is? Can we turn on a dime? It's a real challenge, isn't it? We need to speed up our clock speed. Now, my penultimate slide is about a big company called Amazon. Everyone's heard of them. And he had this problem, Jeff Bezos. He had built this company, and by 2002 it had become a monster. This IT systems were all spaghetti. And they couldn't change, and they couldn't innovate. And by that stage, even more than a decade ago, they were massive then. And so they came up with what became known as the API first strategy. And I recommend you go and Google that and read about it. There's a very interesting memo about it. And the memo said, it was Jeff Bezos to the whole company. It was written like sort of 10 Commandments style. It said, thou shalt expose all your services to other teams via APIs. You will write your APIs in such a way that they can be exposed to the internet directly to customers. There will be no backdoors, no direct access to data. You will do this or you will be fired. Have a nice day. Right? Now that single edict transformed Amazon. And Amazon became this first big company to really get APIs. It spread from Amazon to other tech companies, first of all Google, and then Microsoft and Apple. And if you look at Silicon Valley and all the tech companies, they all work like this. And finally, all these decades later, you know what? The banks are getting it. And the banks are going APIs. Now, when you talk to a lot of people about this, what you find is they're if you see this wall here, I need to go quite forward here before I fall. Imagine that's the perimeter of the organization I'm looking at, right? A lot of people look at APIs like that. It's if I'm the bank, what are my services am I offering to you guys as third parties? What is that? I call this the perimeter view of APIs. And it's important, and that's the thing that's getting legislated for, right? You'll provide access to customer data like this, in this format. Product data like this, in this format. You can initiate payments from third parties this way and so on, right? That's important. That's what we have to do by the regulators. But the really important thing, the really significant thing from a cultural point of view is to do what Amazon has done, which says every single team within the bank is going to provide access to its services via APIs. And I call this the plenary view. It has to be pervasive through the whole entire organization. We are not there yet. But that's where we need to be. This is my last slide. Hey, Gartner says it. It must be right. Do you know who Gartner are? Gartner, you're going to hear a presentation this afternoon on Gartner. And this guy from Gartner says this: the biggest threat to innovation is internal politics and an organizational culture which doesn't accept failure and doesn't accept ideas from outside or cannot change. You know? We came across that quite by serendipity, right? And he says, right, oh, excuse me, my phone's ringing here. It's my grandmother. I better take it. Hi, Gran. Look, I can't really speak just now. I'm speaking to all these really important people right now. You've got a message for them. What is it? Okay. Right, I'll pass that on. Thanks. Talk to you later. Bye. She says, keep taking the cod liver oil. Thank you very much.